Hello, happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday.
Hope you are all having a great morning, day, evening,
Not to mention evening.
whatever time you're listening to this.
Or time zone.
Or wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Two Mats regular Q&A session brought to you by the subscribers of the New European. First question from Brett in New York. Oh, wonderful. Hello, Brett, all
Hi,
the
Brett.
way in New York. Do the Mats agree with Joe Biden that a new oligarchy is taking shape in America? And if so, what does that mean for the world?
I do. And this was Biden's farewell address on Wednesday evening, which followed hard upon his hailing the Middle East ceasefire. But, you know, presidents have always given this farewell address. And, of course, the one he was referencing was the famous Eisenhower 1961 warning about the military-industrial complex. And Biden talked in his speech about the tech-industrial complex. And he's right. I mean, there is an oligarchy. It's in plain sight that's been gathering around Trump in Mar-a-Lago and elsewhere. And it is composed of kowtowing tech oligarchs who want to get as much as they can out of these 4 years in terms of, you know, artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, and everything else. And they are, as we have often said on the podcast, already far too powerful. And I fear they're going to get even more powerful.
I agree completely. And I think what's different this time around is that the oligarchy that's springing up is not constrained by any national borders. You know, these are people who have enormous day-to-day influence across certainly the Western world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And beyond. So, you know, when... like I said, when I saw Zuckerberg do that video, my heart sank because it's not, you know...
Ask Trump for help with Meta's battles overseas.
Exactly right. It's one thing looking at
inside
a
America,
state doing its own
absolutely.
stuff, but it's another thing when you realise that you're going to be affected by their national interests. That's chilling.
Well, you know, there were whispers this week of Musk buying TikTok.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether he'll do that. But what is true is that one way out of the TikTok problem, because America is sort of edging towards banning TikTok because of its Chinese origins, would be for Musk to organize a sale to a US buyer with some collateral backing from Musk.
Yeah.
Now, Musk himself is very close to Beijing. So what is that all about? You know, who is he representing? I mean, obviously himself, but these guys are way too powerful already. And they are clearly going to get a lot more. I mean, they make the robber barons of the Gilded Age look like
nickel and
puny people.
Thank you, Brett, all the way from New York. Next question.
Okay, this is from Graham Smith. Trump wants Greenland by hook or by crook. Doesn't that remind you of Russia and Ukraine? Perhaps we should be sending arms to Greenland.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the difference is that Trump hasn't actually invaded, and nor do I think he will. But
no, I think he was really taking the piss at that Mar-a-Lago press
Well, he was
conference.
just being himself.
He wouldn't rule it out, but
Exactly.
yes, you're right.
But equally, it's a fascinating debate. And the more I look into, I'm going to say something controversial now.
Go for it.
Which is that the way Denmark has treated Greenland
very shabby
over the years is appalling.
Yeah.
And frankly, if I was a Greenland native, I would take the best deal on the table.
Well, I think that's actually what he's thinking.
And I'd display zero loyalty to Denmark.
Yes.
Because, okay, they subsidise Greenland's development right now. But over the years, they've pursued policies that are nothing short of disgusting.
Yeah.
You know, it's resonant of how mothers in Ireland were treated way back when. You know, they would practically kidnap young Inuit children.
Because most of the people, we should point out, it's only about 56,000 and about 90% of them are Inuit.
That's right.
So,
and they would take their children and develop them as, quotes, model Danish citizens. And they would also, there was a policy in the 60s around inserting coils into teenage Inuit girls to prevent pregnancy.
Real eugenics.
It's total eugenics.
Appalling.
And, you know, it's almost within our it's within our lifetime.
It is, yeah.
So I don't think Greenland owes Denmark anything. And frankly, I know this sounds counter to maybe what people would expect me to say, but if Trump can offer the Greenland people a better life and a better deal, then go for it.
Yes, I mean, America has tried in the past. I mean, Truman wanted to buy Greenland. It's obviously strategically closer to America than it is to Denmark. It has a lot of natural resources, and its position is very important. Again, I mean, we've talked recently about Trump is, in the end, always a real estate developer.
Yeah, right.
And there is a logic to this. But I think you're right that if it happens, it's very important that it be not just a sort of acquisition by USA PLC, as it were, but be or Inc. rather, but be to the benefit of the Greenlanders. And I mean, I think there is something odd about his Greater America obsession. And I think, I don't know whether he'll get Panama or Greenland. He's certainly not going to get Canada. That's ridiculous. But it is part of his curious, deranged vision for the second term that he extend the borders of America. And I wouldn't this is probably the one of all of them that has most potential.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, he has to devote bandwidth and attention, which he's so bad at.
Yeah, but we were talking on the
Thursday
podcast about climate change.
Yes.
Now, who knows what Greenland will look like in 100 years' time? And
Brazil.
Exactly. It could be the new most habitable country on Earth. So,
But he won't believe that because it's a climate hoax.
Yeah. Because it's interesting, isn't it? The biggest example of acquisition of territory beyond the Louisiana purchase and all of that is the purchase of Alaska from Russia for something like 2 cents an acre, I think.
Yeah, it was even worse than the deal they gave to the Native Americans on various parts of
that's right.
the states. I mean,
God Almighty, I bet Russia's been kicking itself ever since. Imagine if Alaska was still Russian.
Do you remember when Sarah Palin, when she was running for the vice presidency, claimed that she could see Russia from? She was governor of Alaska. Brilliantly claimed she could see Russia from, which she couldn't.
From her window.
That was the sort of canary in the coal mine. Sarah Palin, who we've all forgotten about, and rightly so, was sort of the Trump.
Yeah.
She was being squired around by Steve Bannon.
That's right.
And here we are.
That's right. Anyway, interesting. Graham, thank you so much for your question. Next question. It's quite a long one. From Pete Jones. My belief is that the progressive left has been so keen to demonstrate acts of performative outrage on behalf of minority groups that they've quite effectively weaponized concepts such as woke and cancel culture neatly for the right. A social justice warrior mentality, without considering the nuances, is making it too easy for progressive ideas to be countered with pithy one-liners. Is it time that the left start holding the left accountable for failing to recognise the kernels of truth in some of the right's arguments? That's from Pete Jones. Now,
this is uncanny.
So, Pete, thank you, and I did reply on email. It's a longer email you sent because you do go on to talk about specifically immigration, where the left says immigration's good, the right says immigration's bad, and of course neither of those positions are true. It's much more nuanced,
as you say.
Pete's point is that the left has been hopeless, and this is my belief as well, and I think yours too.
And we've been, and this is where it's sort of uncanny. When you sent it to me, I thought that, wow. I mean, talk about from Pete's lips to God's ear.
Because we just had an editorial conference where for an hour we've discussed
hammered out this.
And we arrived at the perhaps obvious conclusion that the left has to start conceding that some of the points that the right are so effectively making have elements that do need addressing. We can't just dismiss stuff out of hand and say, no, you're wrong. You're wrong.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that Pete makes several very important points. One is that the performative quality of the left's discussion of these issues. So I don't think that much of what is described as wokery has done much for anti-racism and anti-sexism.
Right.
And I think those causes are really important. And I think that just putting a post on Instagram about George Floyd didn't really get anything done about police brutality towards people of colour, for instance. Yeah. And I think that we have to be much more action oriented. And then moving on to the other stuff, which is one of the reasons that the immigration debate has got so horrible and ugly and vile and often openly racist, is that the left has been so craven I mean, it has just left that territory and terrain to the right, who prowl across it. You've got Kemi Badenoch this week talking about peasants.
Yeah.
I mean, what's going on? You know,
and it's because, Matt, isn't it? Because we are, if we're honest, there's a fear. To Pete's point, there's a fear of upsetting minorities about,
and also I think one has to be honest about oneself. Or certainly, I'm second generation migrant. I've lived all my life in London in multicultural communities, and I like it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't personally have any problem. I have a sort of economically a kind of Wall Street Journal view of pretty liberal immigration policies on economic grounds, and culturally, I'm very happy indeed to live in a diverse community. But I'm also having to accept that it's not about me.
Yeah.
You know, this is about the social fabric, and also I think there's a point we were discussing as a group about this being, as it were, the permission slip to talk about lots of other things, that until the progressive side of the house starts to acknowledge that people feel strongly about this without in any way giving any quarter to racism and bigotry, I mean, underlined 3 times, we won't be able to talk about all the other important things like equality and climate change and Europe, and you know that this has become the kind of system has got snarled up by our silence on this. And well, you know, we've had cause often to discuss on this podcast and elsewhere the fact that one of the terrible mistakes of Remain in 2016 was just to steer totally clear of the immigration issue, and we're now living with the consequences of that.
Very interesting that there was a discussion. We ran a piece. It's this week's cover piece by Peter Hyman.
Which is really good. If you haven't read it, listeners, check it out.
Honestly, it's like
cut out and keep.
I mean, the first part of it is a very objective assessment about why we've got it wrong as progressives, and the way
actually the
way we go ahead,
best I've read.
The way we conduct ourselves. And by the way, Peter's coming on the podcast in a couple of weeks,
will be really good,
and we'll explore this in much greater detail. But Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell on the
Rest is Politics
had a discussion about that piece. And Rory made the point that the one area where Peter rushes past is immigration. He deals with it in a sentence. And I thought that, well, that is symptomatic, isn't it, of the problem, is that there are things that we are scared to get into because we know instinctively where it leads us, and it leads us into very difficult and comfortable waters.
Yes.
And the truth is, to Pete's question, we're going to have to recognise what those waters are. We're going to have to get used to feeling slightly out of our depth and uncomfortable when we're talking about them, because if we don't talk about them, if we don't talk about immigration in particular, it doesn't matter what else we talk about, because immigration is the topic everyone is beating us up about.
I think, and we kind of concluded this, didn't we, that we need to do some sort of journalism on it, over the months ahead. But I mean, the more I think about it, the more actually there's something new in this, which is that if you think about the great liberal thinkers like, say, Isaiah Berlin, they were absolutely clear about the problems that pluralism posed, whilst being totally decent. I mean, they weren't. I mean, Berlin was someone who witnessed some of the worst horrors of the 20th century, both in Russia and in in terms of relatives in the Holocaust and so on. He was in no way racist, but his whole point was, if you want liberalism to work, you have to acknowledge what he called value pluralism, and the fact that different systems of values conflict, and how do you negotiate that. And we've sort of lost that talent, I think. We've kind of developed sort of squeamishness, which is really dangerous, because society is going to get more and more and more and more and more complex, multi-generational, multiracial, mobile to an extent. We've talked about climate change. The mobility of the human race is going to get greater and greater and greater. We cannot not talk about these things. And again, I don't think this has to be a pessimistic project. For the right, it is. They want to build walls and send people back wherever, I'm not quite sure where, and tell them they can't keep any of their culture at all, and they have to be nativists or nothing, and that's ridiculous.
And it's also never actually been the model that this country's
not
thrived with.
Not in the slightest. I mean, I felt that the way that the Windrush scandal unfolded was a very bad sign of how, as it were, the progressive side of the House not really keeping its eyes open, but being so busy with placards and hashtags and pronouns and virtue signalling that I mean, the Guardian did a great job on that scandal. Amelia Gentleman did an amazing job, but we need to be with our, right deep in the weeds on all of these questions and speaking up.
And I also think, Matt, that there's an approach to this argument that the progressives take, which is actually, when you analyse it, it's wholly different to the approach the right takes. We approach it as though it's an argument that needs to be won, that we need to convince other people of our righteousness, that we're right, and we're going to convince you about why we're right. Whereas a lot on the right don't take it as an argument. They're not trying to convince us they're right.
No.
They know we will never be convinced.
Yes.
They're trying to explain to us, let's be kind, they're trying to explain, let's be generous. They're trying to explain to us that this is going to happen and that we need to accommodate their view, their worldview.
So, I mean, to paraphrase, they're saying, you haven't listened to us.
Yeah.
And this is how it's going to be.
And it makes me think of a family. When you have a family, you may be the kind of father that says it's my way or the highway, and I'm the breadwinner and I'm going to do this and I know best, and children, you will just gather round and listen to how it's going to be. Or after a little bit of experience as a father, you may realise that that's bollocks, never going to work.
More than 6 months.
And you have to work out how you're going to please the kids, please the wife, please yourself. You fit it all in. And that, I think we've been singularly bad at trying to accommodate other people's problems.
Yes, very much so. And not to, I mean, I think precisely because I think the battle against racism is so important, I think we should be very careful who we call a racist. Let me phrase it like that. Which is not for a moment to diminish systemic racism and structural racism, which I think are massive problems. But I think that the way that people reach for that word to basically give them a sort of ejector switch out of a debate is often very cowardly.
Well, and also unconstructive. It doesn't get us anywhere.
And by the way, as I'm sure is clear, neither of us are saying 3 cheers for Farage, we're now reform. Quite the opposite.
Oh no,
the polar opposite.
No, the whole purpose is so that we can effectively counter Farage rather than just screaming into a wall.
Yes,
because that's what he represents.
Because saying, I think there is now incontestable. There is proof of concept that shouting "we're right" doesn't work.
No. All right. Listen on that.
But thank you. Lots more to come.
Yeah, there really is. And I've just without getting too kind of up my own arse. Philosophically, I think it's absolutely tremendous territory for discussion. It's fascinating
and regrettably underexplored.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll be back in a moment with some more of your fantastic questions. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you're enjoying our Sunday Q&A. Next question.
Why is no one discussing modern MMT, modern monetary theory? Stop worrying about how you pay for stuff and worry about how you resource it. The current economic status quo is clearly broken. The UK government isn't a household budget. It can't run out of money. It's a currency issuer, not a user. You really need to interview Professor Richard Murphy or Stephanie Colton from Russell Sage.
Right, I'm out of my depth immediately.
Well, I'm not an economist. What little I know is as follows, which is that MMT, modern monetary theory, is, which the only thinker I know who's associated with it is a guy called Warren Mosler, who's still alive, I think, an American hedge funder and economist. And the bottom line, Russell describes it well, which is governments don't have to worry about debt and deficits because they can just carry on printing money. Mm-hmm. That's what it really means.
Isn't the consequence of that massive inflation?
Yes, and this is why actually it has fans. Corbyn flirted with it briefly, possibly through the Professor Richard Murphy, who's a great sort of guru for the Corbynites. And in America, people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez quite like MMT, but it is, as you say. If you carry on printing money, inflation goes crazy
Yeah.
accordingly. And also, if no one else is observing this rules of the game, you know you will end up with massive debts you have to repay. You know, you in the end, eventually, which is why it has never been, honestly, to my knowledge anyway, and happy to be corrected on this, it's never really been applied. The knowledge I have of it is from being a great admirer and reader of Paul Krugman, who just stopped writing for the New York Times and now does a newsletter, Nobel Prize winning economist, and he's pretty Keynesian, pretty to the left, and he's always said MMT goes way too far in the way it's sort of nonchalant about debt. So that's some of my knowledge. However, I think Russell's right that we're in a moment about capitalism generally where we should listen to as broad a range of people as possible. So thank you for that suggestion. We will get someone on the podcast to talk about it and other things.
Well, if Professor Richard Murphy
is
or
listening,
Stephanie Kelton are
come
listening,
on in.
Yeah, please.
We'd love to talk
get
to you.
in touch at 2mats@tnepublishing.com. We'd love to hear what it's all about. Thank you for your question. Next question from a mega member.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's a reference to our hats.
That's Make Europe Great Again.
Go to the store after we've answered this question and buy a mega hat.
Yeah.
They're beautiful. God, I'm getting more and more like them. They're beautiful hats. Oh, God. Anyway, the question is, who will prevail, Musk or Trump? If Trump sacks Musk, how then might Musk retaliate? Good question, Mega.
I think the answer is Trump will prevail. And all of this will happen within about 2 months max.
On Tuesday.
Honestly, yeah. I mean, I've already heard Trump saying Elon's around here too much. Why is he here all the time? So I think Musk is probably getting on Trump's nerves big time, bigly.
Well, can you imagine what it must be like having... I mean, of all the... I don't think Trump is the man given to much reflection or regret, but giving him a unit, one of the chalets they have in... Mar-a-Lago, very well appointed, to live in since the election. Not a good idea.
Is that what he's done?
Yeah, I mean, basically...
So is Musk there on site all the time?
I mean, I imagine he flies off to his various plants and to fly some beautiful rockets into the sky. So I don't think he's there every day, but he has a unit.
I wonder if that's... So I saw a tweet of his... where it was a picture of his bedside table and there was about 7 cans of Coke.
Yes, I think that was...
He said, I have a drink problem. And but the thing that occurred to me was that I looked at it and I thought, that is not the bedroom of the world's richest man.
No, indeed. I mean,
it looked like an IKEA kind of setup.
It could be that he was, because when he goes to the Tesla plant or to go and beat the various people who work, 5 people who are left working at X, he famously stays down at heel places or indeed in the office. But no, I mean, he is on site, which I think must be driving everyone ballistic. I mean, I think I think you're right, Matt. I think that marriage will fall apart very quickly, and Trump will humiliate him in some way. The problem, though, is that I suspect that by the time it does break down, Musk will have got most of what he wants anyway.
Right.
I mean, Musk is South African. He doesn't want to be president.
He cannot.
He cannot be president. He's never.
But the Constitution.
He can't be. So unless Trump violates the U.S. Constitution totally by running for a 3rd term, which I think famous last words, I think even he won't do, or teeny weeny 5% chance he runs for office again in a sort of Putin style by running as the vice presidential candidate to a cipher.
God's
so
sake.
if they put up someone who is obviously just a front man like Donald Jr., right, as the presidential, I don't think it's settled, but it is constitutionally possible, right? But let's say that doesn't happen. He leaves office in January 2029. Musk will just be carrying on gobbling up countries in the world. So who is the winner at the end of that? Trump will be a moderately wealthy seller of trainers and cards and Bibles, right?
Maybe I'm looking at it too much in the short term. Then.
Well, I think the question, I mean, the serious bit of the question is, where does power lie? Because I think the reason all these tech maniacs are clustering around Trump is because they see 4 years in which to sort of, like vampires, drain the US state of blood so that they can then move forward unfettered in AI, crypto, and all the other sectors they're interested in. And so I don't think Musk judges power in terms of the way we do, in terms of institutional control and democracy. I think he wants just to run the world. How it will end, God knows.
But my view on Musk is that everybody gives him too much credit. And I don't think he's the great innovator that people say he is. If you do enough research, you'll discover that he's never actually invented anything. He was clearly a very clever guy, but the thing he's cleverest at is hijacking, like a cuckoo in the nest, other people's great businesses and then leveraging them brilliantly and getting lots of government subsidies. He's also a very flawed human being, which we've seen. He's intemperate. He's ignorant about many things, but that never stops him sounding off about them. He's insanely confrontational and he's full of pique. Now, none of those things, I think, make a recipe for a guy like a J.D. Rockefeller who is going to see over some stately progression.
I absolutely agree with that. He's not remotely in that mould. But the sort of the crash barrier I always get to on this is that so many governments, particularly the US federal government, but also increasingly Chinese government, is dependent upon his proprietary technology. And as it were, unwinding their relationships with Musk is going to be very hard. I mean, you're right, he's not a tech genius, but he is in his own way, if you use political to just mean power rather than democratic power. He is a political genius, which is an odd thing to say about a demented troll who plays video games and takes ketamine. But it's a sad reflection on our world that he has taken advantage of all the loopholes and open doors that we've left for him.
Interesting.
It's a very interesting question.
Great question.
But it will be the fireworks ahoy,
From Frank Lamosa 374. The problem with AI, artificial intelligence, is that increasingly algorithms are deep learning models that are black boxes. No one knows what the models have learned, which is why we get the so-called hallucinations, in which we get the occasional nonsensical output but cannot really explain what happened. Is this a threat to civilization?
Yeah, it is. And I think that the sealed element of AI is perhaps its most terrifying dimension, because I think we were talking about this last week. The way in which chat as a verb is replacing search, and people are going to AI rather than good old-fashioned Google to make their inquiries.
Well, Matt, even
on Google,
not even going, just being
force-fed AI, right? Yeah. And we know little already we know next to nothing about how social media algorithms work. And Google search engine optimization works, except that we know that it's enormously powerful, and that if they change the algorithm, it can break a company, or a political cause or whatever. AI is that on steroids, and I think that if I was sort of to be putting something into the in tray of a new head of government in one of the more powerful countries in the world right now, I would say, are you looking to get some measure of algorithmic transparency? Because to take Musk, he promised when he bought Twitter and turned it into X, one of the things he said before he took ownership of it was he was going to download the whole algorithm, and he's downloaded bits of it.
I mean, my analogy with AI is it'll be every bit times 10 as disruptive as the internet was, and the internet changed everything.
I completely agree.
And the problem is it's unforeseeable in how it will change. If you look at how things develop, a lot of it is developed by what you would call bad players. Like if you look at how the internet has developed, many of the innovations of the internet have been developed by the porn industry.
Of course, and it'll be the same with AI.
So wherever the money is, wherever the juice is, that's where AI will.
In the same way that crypto is being, it's sold as this great libertarian escape and emancipatory rubbish. It's a way of hiding criminal and terroristic financial transactions. That's its real purpose.
So I'm pretty sure that there will be things that AI... And the other point to make, by the way, is that it doesn't matter what Keir Starmer stands up and says he's going to do about AI.
Emphatically not.
It will be developed by good people, bad people, abroad, here, wherever. It'll be developed, whatever happens. The one chance you've got as a government, I think, is in trying to control how it's deployed.
Yes.
But even that, I think you're clinging on by your fingernails. And my only hope with AI is that I'm sure it will do loads of horrific things. If you think about how you can squarely point the rise of paedophilia in Western civilization on the advent of the internet, because it's suddenly enabled paedophilia to take place, right? AI will do something just as horrific as unleash that. But given the problems that we face as a planet, we talk about climate change and mass migration, all sorts of, health issues, cancer, and all of this business. AI's got more of a chance of solving that kind of stuff than silly old humans tapping away at a computer. So
very much so. And I think that one of the challenges in this is that when the history of the last 20 years are written, one of the things that everyone will have to accept is that legislatures had almost, in some cases, one or two people that understood the problems they were dealing with. So, for example, really, when it came to social media, the only person in Parliament, no longer in Parliament, who understood it was Damien Collins, who did a huge amount of good in trying to regulate and got somewhere. Yeah. But the truth is that every representative in every democracy should be on top of this.
Where is he these days? He was very impressive, Damien Collins.
He's just written a book, I think, on Lloyd George. I think.
Has he?
Yeah, no, he's a great guy. We should have him on, actually.
We should get him. Honestly, I thought he was one of very few impressive people of that era.
Damien is one of those people he represents a now almost dead strand of centrist conservatism, which is genuinely interested in the contemporary, and excited by it.
We should get him on. I met him briefly. I'm pretty sure this is right. He was at one of my most proudest moments was the New European was part of a big exhibition at the London Design Museum in Kensington.
I didn't know that.
It was fantastic. Honestly,
what a great thing!
It was amazing. We had our own little wall full of New Europeans about political protest.
Great organisation, great institution.
And he was there. He was a great guy. Okay,
he's a lovely man.
Time for one more question.
What do you think of the BAFTA nominations this year? Bit of a mixed bag, I thought. Any disappointments or predictions? Matt, what did you reckon?
From Olivia in Herne.
Oh, sorry, Olivia. Yes, thank you.
Well, I unlike you, I haven't seen all of the films, but the one that cleaned up on the nominations,
Conclave.
I kept thinking of Calvary, but same idea. The one that
same broad.
Conclave, same sort of theme. That I thought was magnificent.
It's looking good for Conclave, isn't it? I mean, Olivia's right. It's a mixed bag in that there are loads of films missing and people missing from the categories who might turn up in the Oscars. Yeah. So I was just looking at the best film, and it's Anora, The Brutalist, A Complete Unknown, Conclave, and Emilia Perez, all of which are excellent. But where is Luca Guadagnino's Queer, the brilliant William Burroughs adaptation with Daniel Craig? Where is Paul Capadia's All That We Imagine Is Light? Where is Ramal Ross's Nickel Boys? Where is Jesse Eisenberg's Real Pain? It's kind of good that, but when it's been a great year and there's lots to choose from. But I think that it's BAFTA is going to be tightly run, and I think the Oscars even more so, which is good. I'm glad that it's been a great year.
Well, what's your prediction? What's going to win Best Film?
Well, at the BAFTAs, I would say it's between The Brutalist and Conclave.
Yeah. You've seen The Brutalist, haven't you?
No, I'm seeing it on Saturday, but everyone raves about it.
I can't wait to see it.
It's Adrian Brody, post-Holocaust, a bit of Ayn Rand, a bit of architecture in America.
It's right up our pompous arsehole.
So, I mean, it's like Mr. Pompous goes to the movies, I mean, and it's nearly 4 hours long, so I shall have to get an entire keg of Coke Zero, to get me through. But no, I have a feeling.
So that and Conclave, you think, are the two
in the BAFTAs? Because I think there's a sort of home. It's a bit of a home draw for Conclave. I think at the Oscars, the energy is moving behind The Brutalist. Now I'm a bit unsighted. I haven't seen it, but unsighted on it. Does look pretty good for it.
Really?
Yeah.
It's not too much for Hollywood then, no?
Well, the Oscars, they do like a bit of art house occasionally.
Do they?
Well, remember Parasite, right?
Yes,
You know,
yeah.
occasionally they'd like to give it to. And The Outsider actually is Emilia Perez, which is on Netflix. If you haven't seen it, folks, very wonderful experimental musical film.
This is about the transgender.
Yes, it's about a. I mean, it sounds totally off the wall. It's about a Mexican cartel boss, really brutal gang boss who's trans.
Yeah,
and what happens. Brilliant. And but it's a beautiful film.
Yeah.
And it's captured a lot of hearts. So I can't quite see it winning, but it might.
Yeah.
It just might.
Brilliant. Well, I won't say any more, but people who've seen the films will know what I'm saying. But obviously, questions around gender playing large in at least a couple of the favourites there.
They are, and it's really well done.
Yeah,
it's really
brilliant.
well done.
All right. Well,
maybe it's time. It's an issue as an issue.
Yeah.
Maybe its time has come. For a movie. Wouldn't it be good?
Be fantastic. Olivia from Herne Hill, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great honour and privilege of being this week's last question. We'll be back with more tomorrow.
Yes, Monday.
A long episode that you
can listen to before the inauguration.
Yeah, you can soothe your inauguration
nerves
with. We'll be glued to that, won't we?
We will be glued to it, and God knows what he'll say.
I just hope it's as good as the last time when George Bush afterwards turned around. Was it Hillary Clinton? He said that was some
weird
crazy shit.
Yeah. Well, remember last time was American Carnage.
Yeah, that's right.
My sort of prediction is there'll be a bit of saccharine, beautiful unity in there as well before we're going to deport everyone.
Was it you that told me his plan was to, when he was delivering that, he was going to turn round and face
at
the
one
swamp.
point? Well, it's Steve Bannon, for it was he, and Stephen Miller, who's back as the I'm going to deport everyone Deputy Chief of Staff, wrote that speech, and it's very populist, very economic nationalist. I mean, it reads. Well, I was going to say it reads like the rantings of a maniac, but it might be said that it was the rantings of a maniac. But the idea was that he would pivot to the swamp, represented by all the elderly representatives of Washington, past and present, and abuse them all with his back to this crowd, which of course was smaller than Obama's, which caused no end of trouble. So I mean, that will be the first thing will be the first fuss will be the size of the crowd.
Yeah.
If it isn't as big as Sleepy Joe's was in 2021, we're in a whole lot of trouble.
There'll be hell to pay.
Alternative facts to the rescue.
Oh my God! Well, anyway, something to look forward to.
It's all coming back.
History cycling quicker and quicker. It's like a fucking washing machine.
It's like an episode of Scooby Doo.
Well, send in your questions to the two Matts at tnepublishing.com. Subscribe to the New European. There are a few bottles of tequila left when you do, so get in quick. That's at theneweuropean.co.uk/2Matts. Thank you to our team of producers led by Matt Hill at Rethink Audio.
We'll all be on the run by then, because Kash Patel's FBI probably has us on a list.
I'm sure we'll
be in hiding by then.
We'll be on the blacklist.
It'll be from a secret location.
That's right. Yeah.
So for the last time in public, have a good Sunday.
Have a great Sunday. Ciao.